Hello and welcome to season 5, episode 16 of Dualistic Unity. I am feeling a lot of things, but having a great time on top of all of those things and realizing that I don't have to focus on all the things that I'm feeling, trying to figure them out. They're in process. They're already in process, and me, working through them is just my response to them and my willingness to continue to pay attention to where I'm at, what I'm experiencing, what I'm going through right now, not some idea of what may be happening at some other point in the future.
Because it's a bottomless pit in terms of how much you could feel. You can stare into that potential void of all of the emotions that you could have, and you'll find one emotion after the other. You'll just keep going from one to the next, and you'll have one reason after another reason after another reason to feel that emotion, because of course the emotion and some justification for its existence always go hand in hand. But there's just so much to feel, and that's just part of being human. I mean, and we know this when we're born. We feel it. It's the reason that when infants cry, they cry with their entire fucking being. It's because there's so much to feel in being alive. There's so much frustration and joy and pain and happiness and loneliness and connection. There's so much, and it's all really intense when you keep staring at it so much that it's just overwhelming. It's like you're trying to eat the entire fucking meal in one bite, and then you wonder why it feels overwhelming. And so that really is the trick, is to take it one step at a time, to look at the feeling that's in front of you, the one that you're having, and focus on your response to it. Are you going to react in panic, or are you going to relax? And one step at a time, you start to gain mastery over yourself, over your relationship with your own emotions, your relationship with everything that you are. And it doesn't scare you so much to look at yourself, because that's really what it is. We're scared. We're scared when we look at ourselves because it's this bottomless pit. We could define ourselves as anything or nothing at all. And that makes us uncomfortable. But in that, there's freedom.
And in freedom, there isn't a direction. There's not instructions. There's not a right way to deal with freedom, to handle freedom, to be free. All of the perceived ways that you went about things, thinking you were doing the right thing, was just cutting you off from the experience you're having, right? The idea of there being a right way to feel or to act. And there's so many feelings that, over time we go through certain experiences, and those feelings get, a certain opinion attached to them, a certain perspective. And so we think it's the feeling that is wrong. We think it's incorrect to feel certain feelings. And so they come up, and there's a push away. I've been here, I've felt this feeling, and I built this negative idea of what it was to feel this feeling. But you don't have to fight those experiences, those feelings, because it wasn't the feeling that you ever had to get rid of. It was never anything wrong with the feeling. There's never anything wrong with you for feeling the feeling. And so we build all these ideas and reasons to fight what we're going through. Like, what I'm dealing with right now, I know for a fact is wrong. I shouldn't be dealing with this. I thought I overcame this. I thought there wasn't anything like that left to go through anymore. But it's not. We're not on journeys to a destination, to a point where we're done dealing with reality. It's a moment to moment investment or letting go of that idea of control that comes with thinking about a situation, that comes with this narrative that there's a right way to be. And so I think if I think about it enough, then I'm going to figure that right way out, as opposed to being it right now, being the quote unquote correct answer, like you paying attention to where you're at. Like the right answers are all right there, but it's not this path that you're getting to, because every time you try and get to that point, you're missing where it is. Like the answer right here, your entire experience just being right here, not on a journey, not going towards overcoming a certain aspect of yourself, needing to let go of a certain aspect of yourself. Like, you don't have to let go of aspects of yourself. You just have to be willing to look at them and see them for what they are, not something that weighs you down or cuts down your value, but just an aspect of infinite experiences, infinite perspectives. And those are built upon the experiences that we have. That makes us, gives us the tools that we're able to utilize. And that's all they are. The experiences, they're just tools. They never chipped away at you, there are opportunities to chip through yourself and be willing to, let go of that control that comes with thinking about what's going to happen, thinking that there's going to be a point where you figure out what's wrong, as opposed to just continuing to pay attention to the experience you're having right now.
Which kind of leads me to a subject that I'd like to discuss briefly. Pharmaceuticals. I understand that the experience of emotion and the spectrum of everything that we can experience in terms of how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive the world and what we project onto others, and all of that can be very intense. And in that intensity, we want to run from it. We want to regulate it. We want to stop the up and down and make it a little bit easier to manage. And a large part of that is the fact that we just don't think we can take it, that it's going to overwhelm us. But that's the lesson, is the sitting through it and recognizing that it doesn't. It's our panic that does. And so we can rely on pharmaceuticals to help us essentially numb ourselves, to stop the up and down wave from being quite so erratic. But in doing so, we're also limiting our ability to deal with the up and down wave as it is. And we create this dependency on being numb. And it doesn't sound like that at first, but when you look at it, that's really what it is. An antidepressant really isn't an antidepressant. It's an anti-emotion. It's something that numbs your feelings so that way you don't have to deal with them. But in that, you're not giving yourself the ability to gain any strength. It's very much like the example of those trees that we had discussed previously that were growing in a biodome. And these trees would only get to like 3 or 4 feet high, and then they would collapse. And they couldn't figure out why. It's like they're getting all the nutrients they need, and the environment's perfect, but there's no wind. There's no resistance. There's nothing that pushes on the tree from day to day. And so there's no reason for the tree to dig in its roots. There's no challenge. So it has no reason to grow. It has no reason to get stronger and dig in. And that is unfortunately the danger of pharmaceuticals. We're removing the wind. We're removing our ability to establish deeper roots. And it's all in the name of feeling better, all in the name of safety, not recognizing that safety and fragility often go hand in hand. And so what do you do knowing all that? Well, I mean, I know what I did, and I can't recommend anything to anybody else in terms of what you're doing if you are, in fact, relying on pharmaceuticals right now to help regulate your mood, to help regulate your emotions. I can't say you should quit. I can't say that you should cut down. I can't say anything. And I shouldn't be the one that does. It's really up to you on whether or not you believe in yourself, whether or not you have faith in your ability to handle you. Because it's not that you're handling the emotions that are imposed upon you by the universe or the world or other people. You're handling your response to everything. It's your response. It's solely on you. If you run from it, how are you ever going to get better at responding to yourself? How are you going to get better at knowing yourself, at understanding yourself, of developing any sensitivity to your emotions, where they're coming from, rather than feeling like they're just washing you over the side of a ship? And it's just spending time in it. But as we were discussing earlier in the retreat, we spend so much time trying to be something, even so much as to just be a better version of ourselves, that we forget that we feel at our best when we are just being ourselves, which we cannot try to do.
As soon as you're trying to do it, right, it's not it. There's an intention behind it. You're not paying attention to what's actually happened. That's the only place you can be yourself. You're not figuring out the best way to be yourself, focusing on some fucking idea that you think is best. Like, oh, I have the control to be this person, and then therefore I'll have this response. People, we don't know the response that we're going to get, but when it comes down to it, we're trying to be something, the striving to be something doesn't have an endpoint, right? So it comes down to you right now. Are you going to keep striving to be something, become something more than what you are? Are you going to come to terms with this being you right now? There's nothing you have to change. It's just the idea that you have to change something, the assumption that something means something about you, that someone else is in a better spot or they've gotten through something. And so therefore, you should be able to do this, and all of these ideas, and the ways that we're able to avoid those feelings, they hinder that ability, like the tree in the fucking dome. And so, you mentioned antidepressants, SSRIs. Our whole society it's not just SSRIs. So many things are that distraction, are that ability to, when you're feeling certain things, just shoot, I'm not going to feel that. I'm going to look at this. I'm going to feel this. I'm going to ingest this. I'm going to do this, as opposed to just fucking sitting in the feelings. And if we have all of these crutches, these ways to avoid just who we are, what we are, how we're feeling right now, we build this perspective over time that, like, the way that I feel right now is incorrect. I'm always running from how I'm feeling right now. It's not about overcoming how you're feeling right now. It's just sitting in it. It's just being in it. You don't have to measure how your response is changing to it, whether you're feeling it as strongly or more weakly. It's just the idea that there's something wrong with that feeling, with the intensity of that feeling. A lot of the emotions that we run from, that we suppress, that we try to avoid, are just intense feelings, that we attach some idea to, some story to, based on taking our perception of it as truth, based on taking our opinion of it as truth. But it's just an intense feeling. That's all it is. You can still pay attention to reality with very, very intense feelings. You don't have to look at the feeling and try and figure it out, try and come up with this idea of what it is. And so once you have an idea, then you can figure out how to get rid of it. And everyone's telling you all these tactics, just think more positively about yourself. Just be grateful for this, grateful for that. It's like that, those things that you're grateful for are the fucking SSRIs. Like, those are SSRIs too. Those are distractions from being yourself. All of those tactics are ways to distract yourself from how you're feeling. And that's what allows it to move through you, is just looking at it. There aren't any bad feelings. There aren't any feelings that you shouldn't be feeling. But there's so many ways that we deal with the ones that we make the assumption that we shouldn't be feeling. We don't have to get rid of them. You don't have to fight them. That's what, what you resist persists. That's what keeps them around, is that fight, that perspective that I have to get rid of this. It's me getting rid of this. And how much is that reinforcing, the narrative, the story that I'm overcoming this feeling? It's like, right now you are that feeling. That's all that you are. And that's all that you have to realize. You don't have to fight that. You don't have to get rid of it. It's a component of you bubbling up. Now you can see it. Now you can sit into it, relax into it, not try and get rid of it. Just see that that's something within you that's coming out, and look at it for what it is, which isn't necessarily something that's wrong, but just something that's, now seen and able to be dealt with. Like clothes under your bed. You realize they're fucking under your bed. And now you can fold them up and put them in the closet.
Because if you don't, you're likely going to trip over them, or there's something that they're going to take up space that you could be doing something else with that space. I think, and that's really all it is. That's all maturity is looking at what you're doing a little bit more closely, with a little bit more clarity, a little bit less judgment, and actually making a decision that is your own. It's making a decision that's your own, that's not driven by fear or need or lack or some desire to be more. This is where you are. This is it. Right here, right now. This is your entire reality. What is your relationship with it? That's really all it is. And if you think to yourself, well, I don't know, let me think about that. Don't do that. Just, for the love of Christ, don't do that. Just feel. Just feel, and don't label. This is something that I suffered through a lot when I was younger. I had a lot of anxiety because, frankly, I thought I could have control over my life. If I was the right kind of person, if I had the right kind of life, if I did the right kind of things, I would get to happiness and fulfillment and people loving me and all that fun stuff. None of which works, by the way, because even if you get all of the things that you think are going to lead you to happiness and fulfillment, what you've trained yourself to do is need happiness and fulfillment. So you're always going to be chasing another carrot. You're always going to be looking ahead going, well, it's got to be somewhere else because it can't possibly be here. But here is what you've got. So instead of thinking about a journey to some point of happiness in the future, let's just think about now as eternity. That all you've ever known is now, and all you'll ever know is now. And you could think to yourself, well, I'm going to die one day. Yeah. And then this stops being an argument or a conversation. So let's just drop that. But here you are, and you are now in the now, as the now, for the entirety of your existence. It's all you've ever been. It's all you've ever known. It's like you're in a room where the scenery of the room continues to change, but you never leave. And this is your relationship with your life, this is your relationship with that room. The now that changes, but is always now. It's never the future, it's never the past, and it never has been. This is where you are. This is eternity. Because no matter what time it is and when, it's always now. Our perception of time is not the experience of reality. We perceive time so we can make sense of all of the changing now. But it's now that you're living. It's now that you're looking at yourself. It's now that you're judging yourself. It's now that you're tense, that you're afraid, that you're looking for something. It's right now. And you don't have to do any of that. You can just relax because this is home. Now is home. You are home.
Which means that the entirety of your experience, whether it's freedom or weight, any amount of weight with any idea of how long it's been around, how deep it goes, how much is behind it, it's being held onto right now, right? The assumption about myself, the things that I should or shouldn't be, like all of those perspectives exist right now. And so it's always the opportunity to be where you're at, feel what you're feeling, not pay attention to all of the things that you typically have, the story, the becoming, the trajectory, because there's no other place to respond to it or experience reality. There's no other experience that you're getting to. You're never becoming another moment. So even when the weight seems very, very heavy and daunting, like the willingness to just look at it and see it, that, oh, this is just right now. It almost starts to shrink a little bit, and it becomes that, one thing, that realization you can only ever do one thing at a time. When you realize that all of that weight's being held onto right now, it's all doing things to keep you from paying attention to where you're at, because you still think that things can be certain, things can be on a timeline, on a trajectory, and there is a correct one that you should be taking. Like there isn't one that's going to guarantee anything ever. There's never a path guarantees any of the things that you think should be happening or things that you're getting. None. And so when you realize that, it's there's nothing else left to pay attention to than what you're going through, because there are no guarantees. There is no control. There is no certainty about anything moving forward, about your experience, even about the feelings that you're feeling right now. There's no guarantee that those are going to last another 3 seconds. But we maintain this idea that it could, this narrative about how it's been, how it's always been, who I've always been. And, holding on to that almost, doesn't guarantee anything, but it will constantly be holding off the inevitable change that you would embody if you're willing to be uncertain about what you think you are, about what you think you're dealing with, about what you think you're going through. Because as familiar as certain experiences can be, it's never the same thing. You never know what you're dealing with or going through. You couldn't possibly understand all of the facets of the experience that you're having. And so without that, there's not even the thought of a certainty, of a guarantee, of a getting somewhere. There's not even a timeline to be on. There's no other moment. There is no future moment that we get to, that we become, that we turn into something else. But if we're willing to let go of the certainty about what we think we are, it's like it allows those changes to manifest far more seamlessly than when we maintain this perspective that I know what I'm becoming, which means that I know what I am right now. I don't.
It's so interesting because we don't look at ourselves as being incredibly complex, and so we don't treat ourselves accordingly. But if you were to look at the earth and the rotation of the seasons, for example, all the different species and how they integrate and how one thing feeds another thing and feeds another thing, you're looking at this giant, incredible process that you cannot see from any single point in nature at any single time. You have to look at it from the larger perspective, which takes time, which takes attention, which takes patience. But we don't look at ourselves and that field of emotion, of that field, and that field of what we could think about ourselves in the same way. We're like, oh my God, I'm feeling like this about myself. It's got to mean this. It'd be like, oh my God, that leaf just dropped from the tree. The tree is dying. And it's just because we're not looking at the bigger process that's happening. We're not even recognizing that there is one, that there is a bigger process happening. We're assuming that we understand what's happening and we're reacting according to those assumptions. But all of those assumptions come from fear. They all come from a need to think you're certain. Okay, now I know what's happening. Oh shit, why did that happen? Oh no, now I know what's happening. Oh shit, why did that happen? And it just keeps happening like that. And that's the problem, is that you're desperately scrambling to try and grab on and go, this is what's happening right now. And then other things appear and you're like, fuck, that's happening too. And if you keep staring at all of the things that could be happening, you become overwhelmed because there's so much happening, but it's so much of you. And in the same way that we don't worry about all of the things that are happening in a forest or an ocean or all of the forests around the world, because we know that there's a process there, we don't necessarily have to worry about ourselves either. There's a process there. We are maturing, we are growing in a way that we don't necessarily understand, because we have this idea of ourselves. And a good portion of that comes down to this fiction of being an adult, admittedly. Like, oh, no, this is it. You're fully grown now. Your body's not getting any bigger. You have achieved completion. Well done. And and that's just not the case. I mean, you are always in process. And when you break it down and you remove the idea of an adult, you have to remove the idea of a child. You have to remove the idea that at any point you have ever stopped being what you started out as. The only difference is that your body has gotten bigger to compensate for all of the things that you couldn't problem solve yourself when you started. You couldn't run around, you couldn't feed yourself, you couldn't get yourself things, you couldn't communicate your needs, your wants, your feelings, you couldn't express yourself. And so over a changing now, all of those things have developed to solve those problems. You have not become an adult. You are still the infant that you started as. As somebody at the retreat this week said very, very well, we're basically talking babies, which is great because that's true. We have more ability, but we are still the infants that we started as, which is why we still feel the same emotions when we feel like we've been abandoned. We still feel the same emotions when somebody holds us close. We still feel the same emotions when we feel alone. It's the same spectrum. Nothing has changed except for how long we've been sitting in it and how well we've learned to avoid it. But why avoid what we've always been? Because in that avoidance, that's where we find our suffering. That's where we find we're always looking for something to satisfy us. We can never just be satisfied in ourselves because we're not complete. We're not whole because we perceive some perfect version of us in the future, instead of recognizing that we can never be anything other than what we are right now.
And it goes hand in hand, the freedom and responsibility, they go interchangeably. You can't have one without the other. And so as those reliances upon certain crutches, certain means of distraction, which they're all variations of each other, certain variations of protection, safety, it's like the tree in the dome. Sometimes that dome gets taken from the tree. Sometimes the tree's got to fucking walk out of the dome, to find out what it's capable of. And it's the willingness to do that. And, it's interesting. Everyone has their unique perspectives, unique experiences, unique stories, but it's still, always just comes down to the story and the attachment to it, and the willingness when that story isn't as strong to see yourself for what you are, and, not run back to some perspective that's going to make you temporarily feel better, because that's running back to, the perspective that's kept you stuck and trapped and focused on something that doesn't exist for your entire life, focused on your imaginary friend as opposed to, yourself. that person that's been around the whole time that you've gotten to know seemingly so well and yet have no idea who they are whatsoever. Just a familiar story. Keep telling yourself, like a fucking bedtime story that you tell yourself every single day, all day. It's just a fiction. It's not a nonfiction bedtime story. It's a fictional bedtime story. They're far more fun. I honestly don't know if I've ever read a nonfiction bedtime story. They seem to all be fables. So it plays, but yeah, the familiarity with that story is something that we cling to also, because it seems like the lack of familiarity means a lack of safety, but all it means is less perceived control, less perceived certainty. It's like a dropping of the illusion, but without that, it's like we think that that's what's keeping us safe. The illusion perspectives, and to a point, not to say it's safety, but to say that there's certain perspectives, as we talked about recently the last couple of weeks with after the first retreat for myself, I gained a whole new appreciation for perception of myself, the ego, because without that, things are incredibly uncertain, seemingly no structure, no stability whatsoever. So it's not necessarily about not having any of that. It's about the balance, but the willingness to be sensitive enough to know when that balance is out of balance. Because in order to continue to grow and progress, there has to be some semblance of balance. Sure, as it's changing, it's never going to be in perfect balance all the time. It's going to be shifting at all times, but it's going to keep getting balanced out as you continue to pay attention to what's actually happening and have your experience there as opposed to some other sort of experience. And that's it. It doesn't mean that there's a guarantee of everything that's going to happen outside of that, or an ability to avoid certain things, or not deal with certain things, or not look at certain things, or not experience certain things. If you're paying attention to reality, odds are you're going to feel a lot more than you were when you weren't paying attention. And so with that willingness to be where you are, there's the ability to look at all the feelings and experiences. And how often do we have certain underlying perspectives of ourselves or how we're doing? We're like, fuck, where the fuck did that come from? I have no idea, because we're never willing to sit with the feelings. We've gained this perspective that, I shouldn't be feeling this. I should be able to get rid of this. And, so we always think that we have to. And it's just that perspective, that opinion of it that gets in the way of it. And I had another thought about that. It just ran away from me. So I'm gonna pass it to Ray.
And I'm going to run in an entirely different direction. I want to talk briefly because we are currently at our 8th retreat, which is fantastic. And it's been an experience, to say the least. We are joined by a few returning guests, some new guests, and in the experience of these retreats, it becomes obvious that whatever perspective of dualistic unity people might have, the reality is simply that we are people here and now, just being here and now. We're working on our relationships with ourselves. We're working on a relationship with being here as ourself. And so we're looking at our need, we're looking at our lack, we're looking at the things that we think about just for the sake of trying to feel better, just for the sake of trying to feel more in control. We're working on ourselves. And that's what these retreats are about. But it is so easy in this conversation about being in this together to forget that being in this together is being in this on your own. Because we're all in this together, in that we are all in this on our own. That is how we can relate. We can relate in that nobody can relate to what it is to be us, because we are solely our experience. And so coming to these retreats, sometimes people will get the idea that, oh, this is going to make me feel better about the universe. It can make me feel better about my life. This is going to make me feel better about my emotions, about everything. And what they quickly realize is that we don't make you feel better. Our job isn't to make you feel better. I shouldn't be here trying to make you feel better, because as I was saying earlier, you need to establish roots. And if I'm sucking away all the fucking breeze, how can you establish roots? How can you get stronger if I'm always there propping you up, protecting you? And so these retreats aren't an opportunity for you to come and get assistance. They're an opportunity for you to come and realize you don't fucking need assistance. that other people, including myself, see you as complete, whether you do or not. That doesn't mean that you have to do everything perfectly, because fuck, that would be boring, but that you are already complete and whole in yourself. There's nothing else that you need to be. You might be suffering, but it's only because you cannot accept what I just said. And so a retreat is a chance to come and join us, as we know very much that you are already whole and complete, regardless, again, of how much or little you can understand that or accept that. We know it's true. And so we don't treat you like you need to be fixed. We don't treat you like you're broken. We understand that you're not. You're just under the impression that you are. And that is only something that you can fix, but you need the space. And more importantly, you need to be around people who know it can be done. I've said this before. I'll say it again, I'm sure. If I can do it, anyone can. And I'm a slow learner. It's funny because people have a perception of me that I'm a fairly intelligent person, but I'll say right now, the only reason that's true is just because I've done it the dumb way so many times. Just to the point where it's like, oh, right. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I keep doing that. It's kind of like when you get frustrated when you're trying to hammer in a nail. And so you do it faster because you're frustrated, and you end up hitting your thumb again. You're like, oh, God damn it. And then now your thumb's a little bit swollen, so you're even more likely to hit it again unless you slow down. And I think that's the point, is that I just bludgeoned my thumb for years. And in doing so, I learned a lot about my thumb and how hard the fucking hammer is. And the fact that all I had to do was slow down. All I had to do was pay attention and stop judging how quickly I was getting the nail into the board, how hard I was hitting the nail, how many times it took me to hit the nail to get it through to the completed finish, and more importantly, how long the process of the whole board was taking with all the other things I was trying to build with it. And you can take this as far as you'd like, but it really just comes down to the fact that I just wasn't focusing on what was happening in front of me, which is the act of hitting the nail. And that's it. One step to another. We're just dealing with whatever the problem is in front of us, whether it's hitting a nail, whether it's soothing a friend just by being there, listening to them, rather than soothing a friend by telling them, don't worry, you're better than that person, because that's not really soothing them. That's setting them up for a fall. It's always about attention and awareness. And this brings me back to the point about compassion and these retreats. I'm not here to be fucking compassionate to you. Compassion doesn't mean what people tend to think it means. It doesn't mean making you feel good. It doesn't mean making you feel safe. A parent is compassionate, and a parent challenges their child. That's compassion, is to understand that we all have potential and to help bring that out, not through coddling, not through being there to push them to what they can achieve, but to allow them the space to find out for themselves, to actually have some enthusiasm and some curiosity and go, this is for me. What the fuck do I want to do? Rather than, hey, it'd be really good for you, something I'm doing for me. And that's really it. It's not about compassion. It's just about giving that person the same right and space and dignity and respect that you yourself want deep down, which is about giving it to yourself. So your relationship with here and now determines your relationship with everyone in your here and now.
Yeah, because how often, I think about growing up, something like learning how to ride a bike. And from certain perspectives, a lot of people hold on to the idea that the kid falls off the bike, pick them up and hold on to them and guide them, get them to keep those training wheels on, make sure they never fall. That's what we do. It's more obvious when you learn how to ride a two-wheeler. It's like if someone's holding on the whole time, you're never going to learn how to ride it. But there's this perspective that it's scary to ride the two-wheeler. And so I don't know, can we even try the two-wheeler? Can we even give it a shot? It's so wobbly, so frightening, and you might fall. It's like, yeah, but how much fucking more enjoyable for anyone who remembers learning how to ride a tricycle or a training wheels, two-wheeler. That was fucking exciting shit, right? All of a sudden you were balancing, all of a sudden you were locked in, all of a sudden, you're out there free, far more able to move. And, there's also more risk of falling over. There's very little risk of falling over on training wheels, if any at all. But we have this perspective that, it can be okay to hold on to someone else the whole time. And like, you're deriving a lot of value in yourself from helping that person along. And it's the willingness to realize, oh, I'm never going to learn how to ride a fucking two-wheeler, never learn how to ride a fucking two-wheeler if this person doesn't let go. And so it's it changes everything. And it's the ability to find out and pair it hand in hand with the realization that, any perspective of yourself isn't going to be the truth. No idea you come up with is ever going to be adequate. You're more willing to step into things and you see stumbles, falls, embarrassing things, failures, not as failures. They're just steps. They're just experiences, when you're not so caught up in yourself and measuring yourself and this idea that it's a fucking straight trajectory towards something with no stumbles, no falls. It's like some things require at least 17 stumbles in order to get through. Not necessarily measured out as a stat, but sometimes it's going to be a number of stumbles. And we think like, oh, can't have one stumble. I got to get to this point without a single stumble. I got to live my life without a single stumble, without doing anything embarrassing or outside the norm or something that isn't getting me somewhere. Because that's the thing too, is like thinking that everything you do has to be getting you somewhere, never willing to just be where you're at. Because even the things that you have this perspective, they're getting you somewhere, you can still be there for it. But if you think that the priority is getting to that place, you're never going to be there for the thing. And you're especially never going to be willing to do things for the sake of doing them, which is our entire life, which is our entire experience, the doing for the sake of the thing itself, not to get somewhere, not to become something. And, in that spot, there isn't so much fear, concern, anxiety, the psychological stuff, because that's always paired with an expectation of ourselves. I should be doing better than I am. I hope this goes this way. I hope this goes that way, because therefore it's going to be better. And because I have control, I know this. And so then, all the concern, all the fear, all the anxiety steps in, but you don't fucking know how things are playing out. You don't know how many stumbles there's going to be before you break through something. You don't know how much your experience is going to shift towards reality, over the next day, 3 days, week, year. You don't know what experiences you're going to be having in a year, but the perspective that, oh, this one may last forever, or, oh, I've always been like this, and therefore I'm always going to be like this, and this is just my lot in life. It's like the most bullshit thing ever, but it gives us that feeling of control, which we're willing to trade for the experience of uncertainty and freedom. It's like, oh, if I've always been this, I'm always going to be this. At least I know that, and I have control over that, and I'm going to maintain that and think about this so often. And there's a guarantee that everyone else has this perspective too, because of course they do. They definitely do. And I know that. No, you have no fucking idea what those perspectives of you are. You don't even know how you look to someone else. You look entirely different to someone else than you do yourself. You sound entirely different to yourself because you have your own fucking eardrums. They have different eardrums. They're going to hear you differently. They're going to see you differently. They're going to perceive the things that you do, the things that you notice, the little minute details that you're so caught up in. Like no one else sees that shit. No one else notices those things. But we have this idea that we can protect ourselves from those things, thinking like, oh, I can't show those things. Meanwhile, we don't even know how they're being looked at, how they're being viewed. There is no certainty whatsoever besides you being here now, the experience that you're having right now. And you don't have to maintain some idea of what this is becoming, what this is turning into, what you're becoming because of the thing that you're doing. Because then there's going to be all of this weight of what it means about you and what it's gonna do. There's a bar that you have to live up to, things that you have to achieve, certain responses that you have to get in order to maintain that constant idea of perpetual growth, as opposed to realizing, it's not always this. Sometimes it's fucking loop-de-loops and a couple of those. You never really know how it's playing out. And so the willingness to be attentive to where you're at least guarantees that, what is there is going to be seen, going to be felt, going to be experienced, as opposed to, distracted from and avoided.
This has been a fun experience. Admittedly, this retreat has been educational and self-reflective, but also just a lot of fun. There's been a lot of walks. There's been a lot of games of pool. There's been some ping pong. There's been some great conversations. There was some pizza tonight, which was nice. Just a lot of time being, but never trying to be something. Nobody here, for the most part, nobody here came with the intention of trying to learn something that would save them. And as you're hearing some giggles in the background, what I mean is that, and again, this isn't a judgment. I understand what this is like. I've been there. I lived there for a long time. It's so easy to think of this constant state of happiness where your pain, your suffering, your anxiety, your self-judgment, your self-loathing, your loneliness, it's just not there. Like somewhere there's a state where that just happens, and I'm happy finally. It's like a heaven. And as long as we think that's the case, we feel farther from it. And the more we chase it, the farther it gets. And then when we do relax, when we do have a moment of just being ourselves, and we feel like we actually can be ourselves, well, all of a sudden it's right there. Like, oh wow, I can feel free. It's like, yeah, you can, absolutely. And then you start to chase it, and then it disappears again, and it's really disheartening. You're like, what do I keep doing wrong? Why does happiness keep escaping me? And it's simply because you're not learning from it. You're not appreciating it when it's there. You're holding on to it with both hands. And that turns that happiness into a poison. It makes it impossible to achieve despite being the only thing that you can focus on. And it isn't until you stop chasing happiness that you settle into the experience that you are having right now. And in settling into that experience, aligning with it and relaxing, you find that that is the reality of happiness rather than the image of happiness that's been poisoning your life. But there is nobody that can teach you that. There is nobody that can tell you that, regardless of how well it might be worded. The fact is that won't come across to somebody who's doing it, because there is still that underlying belief, but it can't just be this. And as long as that's the case, you'll never explore what this is. And you'll only see what you're afraid this is. And you'll make assumptions that that's all this is. And then that need for happiness will grow. Just let it go. Stop chasing happiness. Sit in the feeling that you have. Accept it. Accept it. Whatever it is, stop labeling it. Stop thinking it's something wrong with you. Stop thinking it's anything. Stop thinking you know. Just feel it. Relax. Go for a walk. And what you'll find is that that feeling is never actually the one thing that you're afraid it's going to be. It's never the feeling you're afraid it's going to be, because it's always changing. It only seems like the same feeling when you're afraid of it, because the feeling that you're having is running. That's the same feeling. You're running from something that isn't the same feeling, though. You're just getting lost in running. Just stay in the feeling. And what you'll find is that it's constantly changing, because it's a part of the process that you are. And that's when you start to see that larger process. That's when you start to see your seasons change. And you start to realize that you've been changing the whole time, that allowing yourself to be is actually the best way that you can possibly facilitate your own growth. Just relax. Laugh if you can. And if you can, laugh at the fact that you can't laugh. Recognize the absurdity in taking your own shit seriously, because you're doing that shit to yourself. It's like, oh God, this is so heavy and important to me. Why does this suck so much? I don't know, maybe because you think it's heavy and important. Let go of that, and all of a sudden it's light. You're like, oh, I don't care. That's okay. Actually, I'll survive. And that's really what it is. I'll get through. I'll get through. I could lose everything. I'll get through. But how often is our life poisoned by, oh my God, what if I lost everything? Well, what if you did? You didn't start with everything. You got here. What makes you think that you can't do it again over and over and over again? More importantly, what makes you think that you aren't going to get better at it each and every time? But if you avoid it, then it's just going to be more of the same. It's going to be more of running from or to, but it's going to be more running. And there's no peace in that.
And the reasons that we run become very habitual, right? And we think there's good reason to run, because right now it's not safe. I can't just be here. I've tried that before and didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go. But we don't come back and try again. Like, we can just be here, pay attention to where we're at, experience what we're experiencing. We don't have to run and continue to run, and even running towards something is just the same sort of running away. It's always just running towards something. It's just running away from yourself right now. It's all it is. So striving to become something more, get some other place, achieve some other thing, win another fucking trophy or job promotion or anything, running towards something, thinking that it's going to solve myself is just that same running. Same running. It's just running away from yourself, no matter what it is. And so any striving that we take so goddamn seriously, thinking that this is definitely going to do the thing that I think it's going to do. It's like, it doesn't, though. It's guarantee that, you know, getting to this spot is going to be a better place that I'm at right now. It's that reliance upon the feeling of happiness, the idea that that's the answer. You know, just feel that way, feel good all the time, as opposed to realizing that, you know, the growth and change is not going to be that feeling of happiness. Like happiness is an experience that we have, and it's closer to what's left when we're not trying to be anywhere else, when we're willing to settle into it. But it's not going to be the first thing you experience when you're willing to settle into it. There's going to be other things there. There's lots and lots there. But to Ray's point, that lack of running, that willingness to sit in it is the reality of the experience that we're trying to get to. Just that faith in ourselves that no matter what comes up, no matter what bubbles to the surface, like, I'll be good. I can ride this out. I can get through this just by feeling it and letting go of my opinion about it and being willing to sit in it and being willing to let go of my perception that this is definitely the thing that I think it is. And I definitely should get rid of it. And it's definitely leading to this. And it's definitely going to be around for this amount of time, experiencing something you used to experience. Like, you know, you're regressing back towards something. It's not the case at all. And besides that, you know, you've been through certain things throughout your life. You've gotten through. Your perspective has shifted millions of times. Think back on the last couple of years. You know, how many different perspectives you've had of yourself, of reality. How many different feelings that you've had. How many different things that you've gone through that have changed. And how many times you go through something, you're like, oh, look back, and you're like, holy shit, I was caught in some shit. Holy shit, I was focused on that stuff. But then you weren't anymore. You know, so there's this idea like, oh my God, I'm going through this stuff. And every time we get through it, it's like, oh, there was things to be learned. There were perspectives to be seen, things to be seen, things to be felt that then we take with us when we are feeling a little bit more free, a little bit more clear. But when you're in it, it's like, oh my God, this is it. I'm never going to be free. I know I've regressed. Oh, I'm definitely back where I was. It's like, even when you were there, you still got here. Even when you were in that spot, like, who's to say you can't do it again with all of the tools that you've experienced? So it's not going to be that same long, arduous journey, but it's like every time, like the Mario game, right? Every time you go through the same sorts of things, it's a little more difficult. So you feel like, oh my God, I'm back to level 1. But you've already gone through that wave of 100 levels, you know, and then you're back to level 1. Not to say that you're, you know, progressing through things, but just more willing to not run. That's all it is. It's not progress. It's just a willingness to be where you're at, which is always what it is. It's not like it's a different experience. This not running. It's whatever comes up, being willing to sit in it and not judge it and not hold on to your opinion of it, thinking that you actually know what's going on. That's the practice. It's just not running from your experience where you're at. The now that you're always in, that you're not getting out of ever. It's just you right now. And that's the practice. It's not a improvement. It's not a development. It's not a trajectory. It's just you right now being willing to not run and sit in what you are.
And that all said, since we are at our retreat and it is the last day of our 8th retreat, I'm going to go sit back and enjoy where the fuck I am with all of these wonderful people. This has been a blast. Great episode. Cheers, buddy. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We really appreciate you being here. We appreciate your support, whether you're listening to the podcast episode or you're here at a retreat. Doesn't matter. You're being you. And you may not see how that's contributing to all of the changes in all of our collective seasons, but it is. So thank you. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Final big fucking shout out to our Vancouver retreat. Fuck yeah. Been a fucking blast. Let's go have a great fucking night. Bye, everyone. Hey.